Which weighs more, a pound of gold or a pound of feathers? You may have heard this trick question before, and the answer is they both weigh the same because a pound is referring to its weight. The reason why this is a tricky question is because we often confuse the concepts of mass and density. So mass refers to how much it weighs, density refers to how much it weighs per the space that it occupies. When you think about feathers, we tend to think, oh, feathers are light. But you can have any mass of feathers depending on how many feathers you have. When we think about gold, we tend to think, oh, gold is heavy. But what we mean is gold is dense. It is heavy for the amount of space that it occupies. So if you have a pound of each, then they would both weigh a pound. They would have the same mass, although their density would be very different. So we can flip this trick question on its head and ask, how much space, we'll say in cubic inches so we can compare them, does 1 pound of feathers and 1 pound of gold occupy? So if we have the same mass, what's the difference in their amount of space that they occupy? This is really important concept. If you have a mass and you are interested in a volume, you must go through the density. If you have a volume and you want a mass, you must know the density. There's no way to convert between volume and mass unless you have a density. The standard system of units is really confusing, and we have an ounce that's talking about mass, and we have an ounce that's talking about volume. You can't convert from a mass ounce to a volume ounce because they're not the same thing. So even though they're called the same thing, you can't use it to convert from one unit to another. So this is really important, if you want to convert between volume and mass or mass and volume, you need to know what substance you're talking about and what the density of that substance is. So to answer the question, how much space does a pound of feathers occupy, you need to know what the density of feathers is. So if we look at this question, the density of feathers is given to us. It's 0.0025 grams per milliliter. So we want to know how much space in cubic inches would 1 pound of feathers weigh. So we first start with what we're given. We are given, let's just start with the feathers. So their mass is equal to 1 pound. And we want to know how many cubic inches is that. We're also given the density of the feathers. Density is often represented by this Greek letter rho. I've seen in textbooks lately more people representing it with a capital D. So you can use whichever one you're more comfortable with. A rho, which is an R in Greek, or a capital V. Either one is fine. Okay, so if we want to go from mass to volume, then we need to go through density. And we need to make sure that our units match up. You can't just directly plug this into our density formula. We have to convert some units first. Because if we're looking for volume, we can rearrange this equation to be volume equals mass over density, but our mass is given in pounds, our density is given in grams per milliliter, which means that if we just plugged it right in, we would have units pound milliliters per gram. Now that's not a unit of volume that I'm familiar with, so we need to make sure that our units line up before we can use that equation. Now if you're comfortable with the equation, you can convert the units and then plug it into the equation, or you can just solve this in one long conversion table. So let me show you how to do the conversion table. So if we have 1 pound of feathers, we want to know how much volume that is, but our density is given in grams per milliliter. So first we need to convert the units of the same type so that they agree. So pounds and grams are both units of mass, so let's look there first, and we'll convert our pounds into grams. Next, we have grams, so that means we can use this, and we want to cancel the grams, so let's put the grams on the bottom. If we're using the density, that means that we'll go to milliliters because that's what our density is given in. The question doesn't ask for it in milliliters, the question asks for it in cubic inches. So we need to go from milliliters now to cubic inches. So we want to cancel the unit of milliliters, and given the reference sheet that I give you, you can't go directly to cubic inches, but you can go to cubic centimeters. And then once you have centimeters, you can convert from centimeters, we know how to convert to inches. And remember though, this is very important since this is cubed, these need to be cubed as well because we're talking about volume instead of distance. Then we have all of our units lined up. We've gone from pounds, we've canceled that out, we've canceled grams out, we've canceled milliliters out, we've canceled centimeters cubed out, and we're left with the unit that we were looking for. So that all that's left to do is go back and fill in the conversion factors. To convert between grams and pounds, you just need a reference value. There's 453.6 grams in 1 pound. To convert between grams and milliliters, careful, grams and milliliters are different types of unit. Grams is a unit of mass, milliliters is a unit of volume. The only way to convert between mass and volume is with the density. So you have to know what particular substance you're talking about. In this case, we're talking about feathers, and we're given the density. We're given that there's 0.0025 grams in 1 milliliter. Then, converting between milliliters and centimeters is just a reference value. It's handy dandy to know that 1 centimeter cubed is equal to 1 milliliter. And then lastly, to convert between centimeters cubed and inches cubed. We know that there are 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch, but because our unit is cubed, we also want to cube these values. 1 cube is just 1, but it's good to write it in there just to remind yourself. Then, all you'll need to do is multiply this out. So 1 times 453.6 divided by 0.0025 divided by 2.54 cubed. Don't forget to actually cube that number. It should be around 16. 1 pound of feathers would take up about 11,000 cubic inches of space. Now that can be a kind of an abstract number. So because this is cubed, if you wanted to think of it as a cube, you could take that number and actually take the cube root of it, and then you would see that's about 22, which means a pound of feathers would take up a space about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. Okay, so now I want you to pause this video and I want you to see if you can answer the same question. How much space in cubic inches would a pound of gold occupy? You're given the density of gold in the question as well. But before you even start to calculate, I want you to ask yourself, would you expect the gold to take up more space or less space? And then when you're done calculating, see if your answer makes sense. Okay, so let's walk through it step by step. If we had 1 pound of gold and we wanted to convert that into inches cubed, we're going to follow the same path. We need to make sure that our units of mass are the same. So we're first going to convert between pounds and grams. Then, once we have grams, we can use the density to convert to units of volume. Then we want to convert our volume to a specific unit, which was inches cubed. We can convert from centimeters to inches by cubing those units and their conversion factors. We can fill in all of the numbers. The only number that's different is this density here. Alright, we know that gold is denser than a feather because if you picked up objects of the same size, the gold would weigh more. So we are expecting the volume occupied by the same mass of the gold to be much, much smaller than the feathers. We calculated that the feathers would be 11,000 inches cubed, so we're expecting the gold to be a much smaller number. If you run all those calculations, you see that 1 pound of gold would occupy about 1.43 inches cubed. Remember the feathers, we said were about 2 feet or 22 inches on each side of a cube. If you were to take the cube root of this inches cubed, you would have about 1.1 inches on each side of your cube. 1 pound of gold would be super small. It would be a little bit bigger than a standard die, but 1 pound of feathers would be really big. It would be 2 feet on each side. Whenever you've finished a calculation, your first question should always be, does my answer make sense? If you imagine gold and feathers, you would imagine that the gold weighing a pound would be much smaller than the feathers weighing a pound, so our answer makes sense. The second and final question you should always ask is about significant figures. So let's go back and look at our feathers and look at the significant figures. So we're given just one significant figure because 1 pound of gold. Converting between pounds and grams, we have 4 significant figures here. Our density we're given with 2 significant figures. This one is exact. There's exactly 1 centimeter cubed and a milliliter cubed because you're converting within the same system. And here, this one's technically exact, but I don't mind if you count that there's 3 significant figures. So the rule of multiplying, you look at the lowest number, so we can only have 1 significant figure in our answer. So this is actually best if we just report this to 10,000 inches cubed. Or if you wanted, you could say 1 times 10 to the 4 inches cubed. If we look at the significant figures of this one, we're still just given 1. This conversion has 4. We're given 3 this time here. This one is exact, and this one is exact, or you could say 3 either as well. Either way, we have 1 significant figure, so we will want to round this answer to 1 inches cubed. And so you can have just 1 significant figure for each of these. So major takeaways, if you want to convert between units of volume and mass, then you need to use the density of the particular substance. And density and mass are not the same thing. You can have any mass of any substance depending on how much you have. but the density of a substance is constant at a particular temperature. That density doesn't change. You can actually use it to identify a substance. And we call that an intensive property, and we'll use those intensive or physical properties a lot throughout this course.